Welcome to the Lincoln-Douglas Debates. My name is Joe Schnitzer, and I will be your narrator this evening. The Lincoln-Douglas Debates were a series of political debates between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas during the 1858 Illinois senatorial campaign. I'm excited to explore them with you. The debates reflected the political upheaval and contentious divisiveness that preceded and characterized the period. The second party system, dominant for decades preceding the debates, including Whigs and Democrats split on issues such as tariffs, banks, internal improvements, and the role of government. However, as this gap between parties on economic and social issues narrowed, sectional disagreement about immigration, the Dred Scott decision, and the Kansas and Nebraska Act fueled the downfall of the Whigs and the rise of a Republican Party comprised of Northern Whigs and Know-Nothings determined to oppose not only the Democrats and the new legislation, but the extension of slavery in general. Lincoln, a rising moderate face of the Republican Party, challenged Douglas, a Northern Democrat, seeking appeal from Northerners as well as slave owners in the South. Beyond their disagreements on contentious issues, what was the true foundation of their disagreements? Let's find out. A central disagreement was about popular sovereignty and its ability to coexist with the recent Dred Scott decision. The 1854 Kansas and Nebraska Act nullified the previously accepted Missouri Compromise, the former giving residents of a new territory the power to decide on slavery. With Northerners displeased with the new legislation, the Dred Scott decision further infuriated Republicans by rendering their goal to prevent slavery spread into the territories unconstitutional. For Republicans, the decision affirmed the political power of Southern slaveholders, which now extended even to the Supreme Court. The decision also ostensibly complicated Douglas's popular sovereignty, for he could no longer offer it as a concession to Southerners. Lincoln demanded that Douglas explain whether or not he believed that the 1857 Supreme Court decision in the Dred Scott case trumped the right of a majority to prevent the expansion of slavery under the principle of popular sovereignty. Lincoln asserted that popular sovereignty under the Dred Scott decision allow the people of a territory to have slavery if they want to, but does not allow them not to have it if they do not want it. Douglas, standing by popular sovereignty in what would become known as the Freeport Doctrine, countered. It matters not what way the Supreme Court may hereafter decide, the people have the lawful means to introduce it or exclude it as they please. The Freeport Doctrine endeared Douglas to Northern voters, but erased the popularity he'd earned from Southern voters with the Kansas and Nebraska Act. After reneging on his promise to abide by the decision of the Supreme Court regarding slavery, in the eyes of Southern voters, he became a villain. Lincoln viewed popular sovereignty and the Dred Scott decision as this Southern attempt to nationalize slavery. Lincoln was paranoid. He viewed it as a conspiracy to spread slavery. While Lincoln did not advocate for African American equality, he balked at the possibility that a moral cancer such as slavery could not only infect new territories, but in the established states of the Union as well. In contrast, Douglas's popular sovereignty is premised upon removing the moral question of slavery from the national political arena, thereby limiting Congress and instead focusing on the legal argument, allowing the legislature of a territory to decide for themselves. Their disagreement continued over what the Founding Fathers' intended form of government truly was. Douglas ridiculed Lincoln's previous assertion that a house divided cannot stand, arguing that our fathers intended that our institutions should differ. They knew that the North and South, having different climates, productions, and interests, required different institutions. Historically, Douglas reasoned if uniformity had been chosen from the outset, it must inevitably have been the uniformity of slavery everywhere, as the overwhelming majority of states at the time were pro-slavery. Instead, legal leeway was given to individual states to come to each's own conclusion. In response to that, Lincoln countered that the variety of institutions among states don't divide the House, but unite it. He also contended that the issue of slavery has always been an element of division in the House, and that America's founders restricted the spread of slavery to new territories. The interesting thing about Lincoln is that he recognized the ubiquity of slavery and the difficulty of abolishing it in the current climate, which explains his promise at this point in his career not to interfere with slavery where it existed. But his ultimate goal was that slavery would eventually be going out of existence, which reveals the moral underpinnings of his argument. Lincoln viewed the prohibition of slavery in the new territories as a pragmatic first step in the process to slavery eventually dying out everywhere. Though Lincoln didn't advocate for the repeal of the Fugitive Slave Act or prohibit the interstate slave trade, he was driven morally to share the quite radical goal of driving slavery to ultimate extinction. A final point of contention in the debates was whether African Americans were included in the Declaration of Independence and its implications on the morality of slavery. Lincoln declared that African Americans were entitled to all the natural rights enumerated in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Conversely, Douglas denied that the Constitution recognized African Americans at all, instead speaking only to the natural rights of white men. Instead, popular sovereignty could theoretically bestow upon African Americans natural rights. Here's an important thing to realize about how people viewed rights in the 19th century. They didn't think of rights as all in one bundle. They weren't the same for everyone. There was a gradation of rights. There were natural rights which everyone possessed, but there were also political, civil, and social rights that different people didn't have. For example, women have natural rights at the time, some civil rights, but no political rights, the right to vote. Lincoln says African Americans should have natural rights, but not yet political rights. Lincoln pointed out the logical flaw of popular sovereignty, that if you admit that there is wrong in it, Douglas cannot logically say that anybody has a right to do wrong. But Douglas neglects to take a stance, instead choosing what Lincoln deems declared indifference of the monstrous injustice of slavery itself. Here lies the foundation of the debates. On one side is Lincoln, advocating against the spread of slavery on the grounds of the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and most importantly, his moral principles. The opposing view is Douglas, who, despite admitting that humanity and Christianity command him to extend privileges to African Americans, shows indifference to the moral question as was typical of party politics, focusing instead on the legality of popular sovereignty in the name of the will of the majority. While Lincoln was motivated by moral indignation, viewing the suppression of a slave's natural rights as an immorality that must not be allowed to spread, Douglas was morally indifferent and chose instead to focus on the legality of the situation, deferring the moral question to territorial majority rule. Lincoln claimed that the adoption of popular sovereignty in the territories would extinguish the moral lights around us. Lincoln's ideas cemented him as the embodiment of the value of a new Republican Party, one of social mobility, hard work, honesty, integrity. With the ability to hold his own against a Democratic heavyweight like Douglas, Lincoln united his party and set the stage to win the Republican nomination for president. On the other hand, Douglas's focus on the legality of slavery in the new territories allowed him to win the senatorial election, but antagonized Southerners and caused a major rift in the Democratic Party, clashing with Buchanan as well. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were a microcosm of the shifting political landscape of the mid-19th century. Focusing primarily on slavery in the new territories and its moral implications, the debates revealed this growing sectional divide between the North and South. This disagreement factionalized the country and threatened to tear apart the Union itself. And a few years later, it did. Hope you enjoyed.